welcome back to the GamecockScoop.com podcast, the official podcast of GamecockScoop.com, which is the Gamecock affiliate for Rivals. I'm here with Pauline Hendricks, who runs social media, has been taking lots of cool pictures and videos and stuff at these first few practices, and Alan Cole, who is the main beat reporter at GamecockScoop.com. First thing I wanted to get into, by the way, I'm Caleb Alexander, didn't introduce myself. I'm the publisher and also cover a lot of recruiting. So I wanted to just really quickly run down all the recruiting news that's happened this week, which has been a lot. Tomorrow morning on the site, I will run my weekly recruiting wrap up. So you can see all the inside, deeper notes of some of the things I'm about to say there. And the title, I already have it, is do you want the good news or the bad news first? Because it's been a news-filled week, but some of that has been good. Some of that has been bad. I actually think I'm going to try to sandwich it here. So kind of a shit sandwich, for lack of a better word. Pauline's favorite word. So
I was really hoping that just was not going to be. We would just breeze over that.
That's just for us, inside joke.
That's funny.
Anyway, so in men's basketball, Lamont Paris, after a couple weeks ago landing Gigi Jackson, which is obviously a huge deal, the highest rated recruit in the history of the program, landed two more in-state signees for the 2023 class in back-to-back days this past weekend in Colin Murray Boyles, who is a 6'7", three-star forward out of AC Flora in Colombia. His AAU coach, Curtis Wheeler, compared his game to Lamar Odom's game, which is like kind of a point forward, meaning he has a lot of variability to his game. He can play like a traditional forward, but he also can kind of put the ball down, create his own shot, create shots for others through assists. So yeah, kind of the same thing that we've been seeing with Lamont Paris and his recruiting strategy, both in the portal and now early on in the 2023 class, is that he's looking for guys that can play multiple roles because his offense seems to be kind of this free-flowing, not that it doesn't have any sort of structure, but free-flowing where guys can play different positions. On those same lines, Arden Conyers out of Westwood High School will most likely play wing, but again, has some of that flexibility, and that's in Blythewood. So again, we're seeing that they're continuing to emphasize the state of South Carolina and Columbia specifically, which I think is really a good move. Not that Frank Martin never got any players out of Columbia or South Carolina. In fact, a lot of the contributors on the Final Four team were out of South Carolina. But I think it's a good move for this new staff that doesn't necessarily have all the inroads with the elite of the elite nationally, to prioritize guys that want to be here and that grew up wanting to be here. I don't know if anyone saw online, but Arden Conyers had this video posted from when he was a kid, like 7, 8 years old, and he's talking about wanting to play for South Carolina. That's the kind of guys if you're not going to get a top 50 national player or something, then you want someone that wants to be here and is going to work their butt off. And by all means,
or both. With Gigi Jackson, you can kind of thread the needle and both boxes there.
Yeah, that would definitely be the most ideal. But yeah, it sounds like both these guys have very good work ethic. Paris and the staff seem to like them, and we'll see how that goes. As far as men's basketball recruiting going forward, couple of names in state to continue to keep your eye on. Jordan Butler is a center out of Christchurch, number 69 overall player nationally on Rivals. He's a 4-star. And then Cam Scott out of Lexington, number 33 player nationally, is a 4-star. Those are both going to be tough to land, but definitely still big-time in-state priorities for the staff right now. And then a couple other just random names to keep your eyes on. KJ Green out of Atlanta, and then Rasheem Felton out of California, but originally from Gastonia, North Carolina. He's the cousin of UNC great point guard Raymond Felton. So some ties.
There's a name I haven't heard in a while.
There. Yeah, right. And then on the football side, so here's the shit part of the shit sandwich. So let's talk about some bad news, but then there's some more good news on the football side. So yesterday, wide receiver Carmelo Taylor surprisingly committed to Penn State. And when I say surprise, it was kind of a surprise to everyone. My understanding is the South Carolina staff was surprised that it happened. Perhaps even the Penn State staff was surprised that it happened. I was talking to some of my sources at Penn State, and they were like, yeah, they're on the practice field right now, so I don't even know if they know that he committed yet. It seems like after they got off the practice field, they realized he committed, and they do seem like they're going to honor that commitment. But there was like a little bit of like a sketchy, like, because earlier in the process, I had heard that we weren't sure if that was a committable offer from Penn State yet or not. But I think they maybe missed on a couple wide receivers, and then sort of put more emphasis on Taylor at that point. So that's too bad. That was my first Futurecast that I missed.
I was going to say, that broke your streak, didn't it?
Yeah, I was
13
17
for 13,
17.
was it?
No, it was more than that. It was for football, it was 13 for 13, and then I had the basketball ones too. So yeah, that was kind of a bummer. And then apparently this counts against your Futurecast streak as well. Jaden Robinson flipped to Florida, so I had him Futurecast for South Carolina. He signed with South Carolina, but then when he flipped to Florida, it also dinged me, which I don't think is very fair. I got the initial thing right.
He committed to South Carolina, yeah.
He did. I got
double
that right.
whammy there, though, going to the division.
So yeah, and this one wasn't a surprise to the staff. So he visited Florida with Cam Upshaw back on their cookout weekend, which was the last weekend of July when South Carolina had their own cookout. And then he kind of has gone silent since then. I've been trying to get in touch with him. My understanding is that the South Carolina staff hasn't been able to get in touch with him. So we all kind of anticipated that this might be happening. And then a couple weeks ago, the staff offered Auburn commit Terrence Love, who is a DB, but also could project as a linebacker, very much like Robinson was. And when that first happened, I know myself and Perry McCarty, who covers recruiting and does some film work for GamecockScoop, we were kind of like scratching our head because we're like, is this supposed to be Upshaw's replacement? Because it happened right around the same time that Upshaw decommitted, but then he recommitted 2 days later. And now it seems clear that this was with Robinson in mind as far as the replacement goes. So we'll keep you posted on any status updates with Terrence Love. Also, if that doesn't work out, I've been told that they might look to the portal. So yeah, the linebacking core right now is pretty solid. We're going to talk about them here in just a minute whenever we talk about the press conferences from today. But you know, it definitely hurts. It's a 4-star out of Florida. Dinged the rivals rank of the class down from 23 to 27. I still expect some other good news this weekend that could bring that back up. So yeah, let's get to the good part. So tomorrow, Bakari Swain is set to announce at 3:45 p.m. I have a Futurecast in for him for South Carolina, and I'm going to keep it. So that used to mean something, but after the past couple of days, I don't know. But yeah, South Carolina likes him at defensive back, and then I'm told that the other top competitor might be Mississippi State, who likes him at receiver. So somewhat it depends on whether he wants to play DB or wide receiver in college. But I think South Carolina would also give him a shot at wide receiver. He's a pretty good athlete all around. And yeah, I'm expecting things to go well on that one. And then Xavier McLeod, I always mess up his last name. 4-star defensive lineman out of Camden, South Carolina. So I think we're expecting his decision to come somewhat soon. He's kind of hinted at it on Twitter. He was asking for a commitment video, all these sorts of things. So last weekend, I finally did nail down that I put in a Futurecast for Xavier. I know a lot of people have had Futurecast in for a really long time, back in 2001, because South Carolina was his first major offer. But I didn't come on until February 2022. And by that point, things were getting pretty murky. So I didn't want to put in anything at that point. He had offers from every major program, his top 6. I don't remember every name on it, but I know Alabama, LSU, Michigan, Florida, the who's who of college football is in his top 6. But ultimately, I do think that if he does commit soon, which it sounds like he might be, that things will look good for South Carolina there. like I said, you can check out more on recruiting in the weekly recruiting wrap up. It'll be posted first thing tomorrow morning. That's on GamecockScoop.com. All right, Pauline, Alan, you guys have attended every practice so far.
All two of them, yep.
Yeah, two open practices where you got to see some really good stretching, and then a couple of press conferences. So, what stood out to each of you so far? I'll start with Pauline.
First off, the team has some great dance moves. I discovered
Juju
that
McDowell
over
the other day. It was, yeah.
Hey, that was a diamond in the rough type video. I will never get one of those again. We'll see. But
yeah, if you're not sure what she's talking about, I've used it a few times on Twitter. I made a GIF of it last night. I don't even know if I told you guys this yet, but I made a GIF of it, so I'll send that out. Yeah. But yeah, just this great moment where Juju McDowell was like dancing.
No one else caught it.
And
Alan taps me on the shoulder after.
Oh,
Alan taps me on the shoulder after.
Yeah.
He goes, "Did you get that?" I was like, "Yeah, I did." Nobody else had it. I was like, "Oh my goodness, this is great."
I put a question to the forum on Gamecock Scoop, like only wrong answers. What is Juju dancing to? And some of the responses were pretty good.
I wanted to put it to something so funny, like the Wii intro music, and like da da da, and just have him like dancing around. I think that would be so funny.
There's so much potential for it. So yeah, I would expect to see our social media team using that after every good news or game for the foreseeable future because it's pretty fun. All right, so good dance moves. Anything else stand out to you yet, Pauline?
I mean, I definitely was expecting to come in and literally just watch, and I didn't have to watch stretching. I got to watch a lot of the quarterbacks throw. I got to see Rattler. Almost got hit in the head with a football because they threw it in the through the goalpost and it hit the wall and bounced back and almost hit me in the back of the head. But it was cool to be that close to the action and see them do things other than stretching. And I mean, all around, it seems like the first day and the second day was a lot hotter, and it seemed like the energy was just like way more elevated. So like even though it was a lot tougher of like an environment, like they were trying to keep the players motivated and clearly like they were having a ball. So I mean, I think that's a good thing.
I think I saw a clip of Byron Jeridu on that second day that was kind of like saying it's hot in Arkansas, it's hot, all over that.
Yeah,
that was
saw
like
that
towards the end of it. Yeah, because that was a 3:00 practice, which anybody who's listening to this probably knows how hot it is in Columbia in the afternoon.
Yeah,
and the first one was in the morning.
So Alan, that's a good transition. What have you seen so far at the practices, and then we can get to the presses. But
practice wise, it's you're kind of looking at little things. Like I'm watching, like I wrote about a little bit. I'm watching the holder battle. I'm watching the punter battle because Kai Kroger is still hurt as far as we know, and even though Shane Beamer said that he expects Kai Kroger to be ready for the Georgia State game. As of now, we haven't seen him out there yet. So they've been working out a couple punters. I wrote about that on the website. I've been interested in watching some of the freshmen, some of the walk-ons. Pauline mentioned the quarterbacks. We saw Daniels throw a little bit. I guess that was in the first practice. I mean, anybody who's a college quarterback has a good arm, but he was throwing bombs on I guess that was last Friday. So that was interesting to me. And just, you kind of get a more holistic roster look because there's 110 guys on the roster. And I think other than Kai Kroger, literally everybody's there because everybody's healthy right now. So everybody's there. The walk-ons are there. The freshmen are there. And you're kind of seeing a little bit more of that than maybe you would on a normal game week where you can't dress everybody, or especially a road game where you can dress even less players.
Yeah, you mentioned Jalen Daniels, and I think that's something that we maybe didn't cover on the podcast because I've been moving for the last month, so like there's been some weeks that we've missed or whatever. But yeah, so that's a walk-on kid that you're talking about. But something that I mentioned on the site at least is he's not a typical walk-on. He's kind of one of those kids that was a little bit of a COVID casualty in the sense of his season was cut short. He didn't quite get maybe some of the game film that other people in his class did. And then he was working out with Spencer Rattler, and Rattler sort of vouched for him, I guess. And South Carolina brought him in for a camp, and he decided to bet on himself by walking on. And yeah, by all accounts, from you and from other places that I've seen, it sounds like he probably won't be a walk on for too much longer.
No, I wouldn't think so. I mean, that depth chart's crowded this year. Obviously, Rattler. It's such a different environment too when you know who your quarterback is. I mean, last year South Carolina definitely didn't know at this time and didn't really know at most points in the season. I mean, you had a grad assistant starting games at one point there. So it's just a different energy, a different environment. Definitely calmer, I think, when you, okay, number 7's the quarterback, and that's just all there is to it.
Yeah. Yeah, Pauline, I saw you catch a video of, I think it was Daniels throwing to Landon Sampson. Any insight on that? I mean, I don't know if that was just a lucky angle or whatever, but it seemed like you saw something.
I mean, I definitely appreciated being able to see the freshmen at least demonstrate and be actively participating in the drills that they're doing, and they're not just the coaches are making sure that each of the players, incoming walk-ons to veterans past senior year, they're giving everybody a chance, which I think is really good, and they're covering all of their bases, which is something that and even while me and Alan and I were in the press conferences, they would talk about or the older kids would talk about how it's great that they get to work with the younger kids, and they're kind of covering all their bases now, just in case, thank goodness everybody's majority of the team's healthy and stuff like that, but just in case, God forbid, something happens, everybody else knows each other's jobs. They have replacements, not saying that people need to be replaced, but everybody gets to cycle through, and everybody has an equal opportunity, which was really cool to see.
I know we're gonna get to the press conferences in a second, but at the media day, not SEC media days at South Carolina's, which you weren't there, Pauline, but Beamer said something to the effect of, I can't remember now, but it was we've got 110 spots and we can dress 75, so we're going to have 35 walk-ons. We're going to have as many walk-ons as we can, and we're going to see if those guys can fit. I can't remember the exact quote now, but it was something along the lines of, we're going to bring as many as we can, and we're going to see who can play, and if someone can play, they're going to be on the field.
Yeah, definitely. And it seems like that's the attitude that they've taken. And you brought up a good point, Pauline, about the roster distribution. I think, early off season, around January or so, after Landon Sampson, who we were just talking about, signed, there was a thought that he was going to have to contribute this year because the wide receiver room was so thin. But then they went out in the portal and got guys like Antoine Wells and Corey Rucker Jr. They're actually both juniors, but and I think that's completely flipped it, where now Landon Sampson, he may get some playing time this year, but he will have a year to develop. He won't immediately be counted on, right out the gate. And it sounds like that's kind of the case in almost every position group, where you have this sort of veteran group, and then you have the group of up and coming guys that are learning beneath them. So yeah, we can go ahead and talk about the press conferences. So on Tuesday, we had the offensive players, a couple of different guys, and then today we had defensive players. What are some standouts from that? I'll start with Pauline again.
Well, I was actually just going to touch on it. It was going to be a good segue, but it is a good segue still. Yeah, when David Spalding was talking and was on the podium, he was talking about how Coach Gray, how you're saying how all of the teams kind of do a very good job with roster distribution. He was basically talking really highly about Coach Gray and how he goes about doing the roster distribution, and how basically just how he prepares everybody, not just the best of the best. So I thought that was really interesting to hear from him, especially somebody who a lot of people say is has NFL draft potential. I thought it was interesting hearing that, oh, this guy who has all this potential is playing side by side next to this freshman, but they're all working together as a team. Like everybody is treated as the same, which I think is a really cool thing to hear from him.
Yeah, South Carolina, especially in the DB room, has had this recent history of guys that were sort of unheralded, under recruited, whatever, and then got developed in their time here and then developed into something pretty special. I mean, you think Jalen Foster last year, who, finished
All
the season as
American out of
All-American.
nowhere. Yeah.
Yeah, and he started as a walk-on. So I think that they
that.
have proven over time that it is worth, sort of turning over every stone on the roster and making sure everyone's getting attention, because you don't know who is going to actually step up over the course of their career. Alan, what about you? Press conferences?
Yeah, my main take from today, especially when we were talking with defensive guys, we didn't get to talk to Clayton White himself, but a lot of guys had thoughts on Clayton White, thoughts on his scheme. I wrote about this. I don't know when it's going to publish, but I wrote about it this afternoon a little bit. The main take is that it just seems different. Like he, not to spoil too much of what I wrote. I mean, the quotes are all online, but you've got Mo Kaba talking about, input, and Sherrod Green talking about just kind of how it's more of a scheme that kind of fits players more. It's not like let's try to, some coaches, some coordinators, we're going to jam a square peg in a round hole here. The take I got, guys just talking, it seemed a little bit more geared towards the strengths of their roster, which I think in this case for South Carolina, it's definitely going to be a cornerback. I mean, you've got a first rounder there in Cam Smith. And I think that linebacking group has a chance to be pretty good too with the experience. We talked to a couple of those guys today, obviously with Green and Kaba. So that's kind of where I feel like they're going to try to be. And look, I mean, you still got to be able to stop the run, which they didn't do last year. I've written about that plenty. You still got to, there's going to need to be some development, especially the safety position, I think. But it's going to be geared around what works for them. And they were also talking about playing with more speed this year, which is kind of a buzzword that a couple of different players threw out today, which I thought was interesting. And I had some more thoughts on that and what I wrote, which you can stick around for later, because we're not going to give it all away on the podcast.
Yeah, that's right. GamecockScoop.com. There's 2 or 3 to 5, depending on the day, articles there posted. So definitely go check that out. So you mentioned Clayton White. I mean, it was pretty clear. I can't find the official 2020 defense rank, but I think that this is correct. South Carolina was ranked as low as, according to what I'm looking at right now, 109th in team defense. Coming out of the 2020 season. Will Muschamp's last season, 2-8. Supposed to be a defensive guru. At times, the defense looked pretty good, but also I feel like it struggled a lot throughout his time here, a lot more than people anticipated. And then for Clayton White to come in and turn around the 41st ranked defense last year, and I believe someone mentioned today they were number 1 in the SEC in turnovers.
Yeah, that was I can't remember who said it, but one of the players said that today.
Yeah, so I mean that's a pretty amazing turnaround, and you can't necessarily depend on turnovers. So there's going to have to be some more consistency in some other areas. But if you can get close to whatever that number was from last year, and improve just consistency, especially in run defense, then I think that you're set up for a pretty good year.
That's the whole crux of it, I think. I mean, you got to be able to stop the run. I mean, I think teams are going to be inclined to run the ball in South Carolina just because that secondary, especially the cornerback group on paper, looks really good. And you look at the early part of the schedule. I mean, Georgia State, top 10 nationally in rushing last year. Arkansas, top 10 nationally in rushing last year. Georgia, that offensive line's huge. I mean, you're going to have to be able to stop the run. I think that's going to get a pretty good sense of that pretty fast about how much better they are in that department.
I'm curious. I saw both days someone is asking several players, maybe it was one of you guys, I don't know, about people that are like talking trash.
That wasn't us, but that did happen. The general consensus is Cam Smith, which fair enough. I mean, he's probably the best player on the roster in terms of just overall talent. So if you can back it up, go
Debo
ahead.
was name dropped a couple times.
Debo, yeah, that was another one. He got dropped a couple times.
And I saw that they mentioned that both are kind of backing it up, though.
Yeah, but also they'll say that they'll be like, "Oh, Debo, oh, Cam," but then at the same time they'll be like, "Yeah." Once they start, everybody kind of gets into it, and it all just like ends up being more of a camaraderie thing than like a actual like dig at you.
You have that a little bit, especially as a corner. Like if you're Cam Smith and let's face it, you're probably going to be matched up with the other team's best receiver most weeks. You got to be able to talk a little bit at the line of scrimmage.
Oh, I love it. We did a full film breakdown of the DBs, and I think Cam Smith specifically a few months ago. You can look that up. But one of the things I noticed while I was doing his film breakdown is he consistently, they don't throw at him very much, but when they did and he made a play, which was more times than not, consistently would let you know about it once he made the play. But I think that the secondary especially has been missing that. You had a tradition of that with guys like DJ Swearinger back like a decade ago, but then you haven't seen that as much. So it's good to get some fire back there. I agree. And that you guys talked about the camaraderie aspect. Like I don't know if either of you got a chance to watch Welcome Home South Carolina last night, but the first segment went into the spring game, and Cam Smith was mic'd up, and that was something he was doing. But even from the sidelines, he was like, "Oh, I can't remember who it was. Number 24, I think." He's like, "Number 24, you don't got this." And then he got scored on, and he like got in his face immediately. But then, yeah, by the end of the episode, you also see the same guys, Cam Smith and other guys that kind of were mic'd up and talking, congratulating people on a big play and all this sort of stuff. So it does seem like it's all in good fun. They're competitive, but they're keeping that sense of team involved. Anything else that stood out from the practice or the pressers so far?
One of the things that me and Alan were talking about this after today. Today, all the players were on the older side. They actually they came in from the Muschamp era. So it was a lot of them I found that a lot of them talked about the whole like team camaraderie, but also like a lot of them were also injured at the same time. So
that was going to be mine. Like
yeah.
We had a lot of guys today who at some point or other have had some pretty significant injuries. Sherrod Green jumps out. I mean, he's played, unfortunately, 3 games the last 2 years total. Like, Mo Cava's been hurt at different points. We had, I don't know if it was 4 out of 6, 5. I think almost everyone who talked today, I'll run down the list to have it open. We had Sherrod Green, Tonka Hemingway, Tyreek Johnson, Mo Cava, RJ Roderick, and David Spalding today. And almost all of those guys have had some kind of significant injury since they got to Columbia, which I don't know if that was intentional or if that's just who was required. I don't know how that shakes, but I thought that was kind of interesting. That's who we ended up talking to today.
Yeah, and Pauline, what were you going to say about the injury part?
Well, yeah, kind of both of it, but no, don't worry about it. But a lot of them talked about tying in both of those, like how they started as freshmen under Muschamp and now are under Beamer. Like when they were injured, especially like last year when, who was it? It was Spalding. Did he play last year? Do we know? I forget, but
Spalding played some last year. Green missed all of last year.
He got hurt in the Georgia game, and then missed.
I'd say pretty much all
of the last 10 games, or whatever.
So essentially, they were saying that like even though they were injured like prior, like even when Shane Beamer's there, they were working hard every day. Like they weren't just lying around missing practice. Like they were still getting like help, other extra like ancillary resources that like will help them out even though they can't be like present on the field, which I thought was like it speaks to just like the program in general that like they're not just gonna like, oh, you have an injury, sorry, bye. Like they're gonna help and work through it with you so that you can be like the best that you can be. I got a quote from I think it was Green, and he said that no matter who you are, everybody plays. And it again goes to the whole thing, like you're not going to be thrown to the side if you get injured. Like they want to help you like be the best. So I thought that was cool.
We heard the term mental reps from 3 or 4 different guys today.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what I was going to say. I read that from, I think, Alan's live updates on GamecockScoop.com Insiders Forum, which every day that there is a presser that we're allowed to go to, there will be live updates for that. So definitely check that out. But anyway, I saw that where someone was talking about Sherrod Green, and they were saying, like, yeah, he hasn't played much of the last 2 years, but he's gotten tons of mental reps, so he's still gotten better over the last 2 years. And yeah, I mean, I think that that's certainly possible. Obviously, you would rather be taking physical reps.
But that's the other thing too, though. It's like you talk about this linebacker group. We don't even really know what this linebacker group would look like with a healthy Sherrod Green because we haven't seen it. Like he's been hurt for 2 years. Like if we get to November and he's played all the games, you don't know what that's going to look like. How much that could help. That's kind of the variable, I guess. That's just where you're going to have to wait and hope he stays healthy if you're South Carolina. But you try to project these things, and some of it's kind of hard to project because you just haven't seen the guys enough and seen how much they've developed.
And to me, that's one of the biggest factors in that run defense that we were talking about earlier. Is for better or worse, there's been some talented guys at linebacker. There's been some guys that are trying very hard, but I think that that's been one of the biggest holes on the defense over the last couple of years. So. We'll have to see if the young guys step up and if Sherrod Green can stay healthy. And I think if those two things happen, then it definitely looks a lot different. Anything else that you guys want to mention about the last week as things are getting into full gear?
Excited for tomorrow.
Yeah, we got another open practice tomorrow.
I
think that was my only. We're back on the practice field. We're going to get another stretching and maybe a few drill session tomorrow.
Hopefully catch some more dance moves.
If Juju's up for it, yeah.
Yeah, so make sure you follow our Twitter at Rivals Gamecock, and then also
TikTok.
Follow the live thread. Oh, and TikTok at Rivals Gamecock.
We started a TikTok, so you can see their dance moves.
It'll fit right in.
Music.
So make sure you keep up with that because we are posting things live whenever we have access to those first few periods, like we do on Friday. And then there is the first scrimmage of the preseason on Saturday. Won't have actual access to that, but Shane Beamer is going to do a press conference after. So we'll have all the updates from that on Saturday as well. The only other thing I had was to talk a little bit about Welcome Home, South Carolina, which it sounds like you guys didn't see a ton of. My only notes is whoever set this up, that's a huge win for the media department at South Carolina. Just the first episode, 100%. I assume Justin King's involved in some way.
Pat on the back.
The first episode, if you've been like plugged in to at least our site over the summer, none of it was all that new. Like they went behind the scenes on a few of the social media campaigns, like Beamer doing his mic drop before the SEC media days. They went into the grit night where we showed some clips that the Gamecock Football Athletic account posted over the summer, where they kind of did like a military boot camp style workout, which was pretty cool. But yeah, for the most part, it was like rehashing stuff that you already saw, but you got to see a little bit deeper on it. And like I said, the spring game with different players mic'd up, especially Cam Smith in the first 10 minutes was probably the highlight for me. One thing I do wish they had, I don't know if you guys have ever seen Hard Knocks on HBO that follow like the NFL teams. Usually they have like a narrator over the top that's stringing things together. And that was one thing that I felt like the Welcome Home footage was missing. It just kind of like spliced a bunch of footage together. There was a deep dive on Marshawn Lloyd that was pretty cool. That was kind of like Last Chance U style, where they talked to the family, went to his hometown, stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, I'm excited to watch all 5. My understanding is that next week we'll basically cover this week. Like it's going to be like a week behind from now on. So we did spring up until SEC Media Days. last night. But then we start getting preseason footage, and then all the way up through the Georgia State game.
Yeah, the
which I
last
think
episode is supposed to run the Wednesday after Georgia State.
I think that's going to be really cool, especially if we get some more of those mic'd up moments or some locker room footage or whatever.
My only take is, and I said this, I was actually in a Twitter space with Ben Portnoy from the State last night. We're talking about it a little bit. This is kind of a weird time for this kind of show. Not that there's a ton of like crossover between South Carolina Gamecocks and Detroit Lions fandom, but this Detroit Hard Knocks that's going around right now is like everything's a bombshell, everything's crazy. Dan Campbell's going insane. It's like, oh, this is just South Carolina football. It's not. I think some people might have tuned in expecting it to be Hard Knocks, and it's definitely not that. But it's still interesting content. And like I said, I think once you get to a football game for that last episode, you could have some interesting stuff there, depending on how that game goes.
Yeah, I think it's. I mean, any exposure on this like national scale, I think, is good right now. Oh, this was the other note that I had, and something I was going to write about earlier. So one thing that I think failed in the Will Muschamp era, and maybe predictably so, was that he kind of came in, tried to do the Nick Saban thing at South Carolina, which is fine. You know, that obviously has worked for Nick Saban. That's worked, and this is also why I'm not sure if Kirby Smart would have worked here, even though he's obviously a great coach.
I don't know about that, but
yeah, he probably would have. You know, he's different level than Will Muschamp at the very least. But I think to succeed at a place like South Carolina that's not got all this like traditional success and got all these traditional recruiting inroads, although South Carolina at times has had really good in-state talent, but you know, not so much lately. To succeed at a place like this, I think you have to be a little different. And I think that Will Muschamp was trying to do things in a very traditional way, and I think that Shane Beamer has embraced like, no, let's be a little weird, like not even weird, but let's embrace. Let's let the cameras come in. You know, can you imagine like Nick Saban letting cameras come into the locker room from ESPN?
As someone who over Georgia for at least a little bit, Kirby Smart would have a stroke.
Yeah, exactly. So if you're going to compete against those folks. I don't think that you can be in their lane. I think that you're going to have to carve out your own niche in your own lane. And it seems like so far that's something that Shane Beamer and his staff have done a good job of.
Agreed. 100%. You know my take. I feel like I'm a broken record. I love all the stuff that he does and all the media interaction that he does. He's just, not only does it like shed a light on us as a team, but also like the players, like they love getting all that stuff. They love the graphics made of them. They love like getting filmed, getting mic'd up, and having like practices where they're mic'd up, sights and sounds, all that type of stuff. Like, Juju literally was DM me afterwards after I posted like him dancing. He was like, "This is so funny, ha ha ha," and like reposted it, and I was like, "See, like they love that type of stuff," and I think allowing them to have that kind of like break in their practice and their hard days, like at an army camp, like I would not want cameras in my face, but they were okay with it. Like the type of stuff like that is really, I think, really cool that he's brought to the table.
My last thing on that is,
yeah.
No, my last thing is just at SEC Media Days, and you mentioned it again at South Carolina Media Day, Shane Beamer said that at this time last year, the only people who were talking about South Carolina were just the people here. Nobody around the country really cared. Not on the radar. It's not really a thing. And now it's like, yeah, I mean, they're not going to win the national title this year, I don't think. But people are talking about them. They're here. People know who they are. Like you turn on ESPNU, you go watch him, dancing at SEC Media Days. You go watch Juju down. People know South Carolina football exists, which when you're South Carolina football, that's not nothing.
Yep,
for sure.
That's what you're going to have to do in order to compete, especially if the state of South Carolina continues to have the well dry a little bit with recruiting. Although I think the 2024 class is probably the deepest that the state of South Carolina has been in a while. But at the same time, you're going to have to continue to make inroads in places that you traditionally haven't, which they've done with the DMV recruiting, DC, Maryland, Virginia, that
I think
they're
the
trying to
Frank
do.
Beamer thing helps a lot there.
Definitely does. And Torian Gray. So
yeah. Oh, yeah. That's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think they're on the right path. Now you have to go win football games. There's been a lot of hype, and you have to back up that hype at least a little bit. I don't think that they have to win the national championship, like you said, but there has to be some improvement. I think an 8-win season goes a really long way here, which if you want to check out the GamecockScoop stats predictions, there's a game-by-game prediction posted on the front page yesterday, so you don't have to scroll very far to find it. I think I had them going 8-4. Alan, I think you had them 7-5.
I had 7-5. I'm a little bit more cautious than you. I still have questions about that early schedule. You picked them to beat Georgia and Clemson, didn't you?
Yeah, so I had a really weird 8-4 because I also had them losing to Arkansas and losing to USC, losing to Florida, but then beating Georgia and Clemson, because that just seems like you haven't been around here long enough, Alan. That just seems like a South Carolina thing to do. Like
you have to. You can't not.
I did say this last night to Ben, though. We were in the space. We're talking because someone else in the space, he was basically taking questions. Someone else said he thinks South Carolina is going to beat Georgia. And all I said is that game, I haven't been around here, but I've been around South Carolina, Georgia games. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be 9,000 degrees. It's going to be ridiculous humidity. It's going to be Georgia's first road game of the year.
Yep.
I
think South Carolina's. Yeah, I think South Carolina's hoping it's really ugly, and I think it has the potential to be really ugly. And if it gets really ugly, then who knows what happens in the fourth quarter?
That's where those turnovers come in.
I just pulled up because me and Ford in my own podcast video, whatever that we do, we did this 2 weeks ago where we drafted up our wins and losses, and I have 8 as well. So I think that's
I will say I don't
lucky
love
number.
Wing and L in the schedule in August because you don't know who's going to be hurt or whatever by November and stuff.
I think that was the hardest part. I feel pretty confident in the 8-4. I don't feel so confident in the path to 8-4.
That's the fun of it. I mean, you got them losing to Florida. I'm not as high on Florida, at least this year. I think that's a game they can win, even though it's in Gainesville. I'm pretty high on Kentucky. I think I actually put them at like 10-2. I'm pretty high on Will Levis in Kentucky.
Wow. Yeah.
So that's a tougher one. But
that's a good segue.
You say Arkansas?
No, I was just saying that's a good segue too. I was kind of high on Kentucky, and then I did the preview for Kentucky just the other day, which is on GamecockScoop.com, and I came away a little bit less high on them because they lost their offensive coordinator, they lost Wandale Robinson, they lost a lot of their offensive line, which I didn't realize. And so, I mean, I think they're going to struggle a little bit more on offense than they did last year, even though Will Levis, I do think, is obviously pretty good. And then their secondary was very unproven. So I think if you can pass on them, which their front seven still looks pretty good, but if you can pass on them, I think they're going to struggle a little bit more than they did last year. Anyway, sorry, Pauline, what were you saying? Arkansas.
I was just interested in seeing what you put, because I know that Alan said it, but I missed it. Did you put a win or a loss for Arkansas?
I gave that a loss. That's just that's a long trip.
Loss. Okay, that's what I mean. That's what I did. Ford put a W.
I mean, it's not impossible. I mean, I wouldn't. But
I just can't give them that early in the season.
That's a really tough draw for your first road game.
Especially I feel like they're going to come off a high from Georgia State. Ideally, they win, and
it's not as much that I worry about. It's like we do.
Arkansas is
good. Very simple football fact that I don't know if South Carolina can stop the run, but I know Arkansas is going to run the ball 50 times, and we're just going to have to see how that goes.
Yeah.
And they got to get over the hump on the road, which they've struggled.
That's the other thing. So I wrote about that too a couple weeks ago. The road game that's going to have to pick up this year.
Yep, and that's the road on the SEC is tough, which is why I picked them to potentially beat Georgia. I think if they split Arkansas, Georgia, that sky's the limit for the season at that point, because you are likely gonna win SC State and Charlotte.
You're heading to
so
Kentucky.
Then you're 5-1 going in 5-1, right?
No, it'd be 4 because Kentucky's the
4-1.
Well,
yeah.
And that's your swing game.
So
I mean, it's a conference game against a team with a similar talent level. It's on the road and it's going into the bye week. Like Kentucky's probably it's hard to pinpoint one, but that's probably the biggest. If I had to choose one swing
50,
game, probably that one.
Oh yeah, if you can somehow go into the bye week 5-1, you're probably ranked in the top 15.
You're ranked. You've got A&M coming in after the bye.
Yeah.
You're probably also ranked at that point. Like that be subtly. You talk about national attention. That becomes a very different thing.
That's even potentially a game day game. At the very least, you're getting a night game in Williams-Brice, or the 3:30 CBS game in Williams-Brice, which
3:30 CBS is in Big Ten now, isn't it? Or does that start next year?
I thought that was next year. I think they have one more year. I could be wrong.
I don't know if you saw that Twitter thing of the person who put the SEC on CBS music to a bunch of Big Ten highlights. It's just grim.
Yeah, they still have 2022 season for SEC on CBS, but after this, it is going to look
going to be weird. That's just going to be weird. Turning in 3:30 on a Saturday next year for Nebraska and Rutgers or whatever. That's
yep, not ideal, but. All right, I think we covered everything that's been going on here in the last week or so. How about we get back together at the end of next week and do it again?
Let's do it.
Maybe we'll have some info on how the scrimmage went from Beamer on Saturday. And yeah, if you guys want the information earlier than that, definitely stay tuned to GamecockScoop.com. There's tons of free stuff, tons of premium stuff. If you want to join premium, it's not that much, $100 a year. Cheaper than Netflix, much cheaper than Netflix at this point.
Better content than Netflix.
Yeah. We at least go with the quality over quantity approach, which Netflix tends to flip the other way. Anyway,
Mike Leach in here to talk about that.
Yeah, that was his whole focus on SEC Media Days after his 7-word intro. All right. Well, until next time, this has been Pauline, Alan, and Caleb, and this has been the GamecockScoop.com podcast. We'll see you later. Oops.